Dear viewers, welcome to Navigating to the New Normal Economy. In the good old normal days, we would love to have greeted you in Bled, but today, let us take you on a bit different live virtual journey. In the process of accession to European Union and its common market, the countries of Western Balkans and Turkey are implementing structural reform measures to boost growth and competitiveness and to ensure fiscal discipline and sustainability. This process is full of challenges of its own, and the modern leaders have been handed a very difficult task. The economic shock caused by the pandemic escalated the challenges and made them even bigger. During the next hour, we will be joined by several guests from public and private sector, and we will be talking about these challenges, what skills, knowledge and characteristics are needed for the modern leaders to tackle them. Talking about the leaders and their skills, they need to be rigorous and cautious, yet imaginative and daring, and much more. Let's hear the opinion of Ms. Jana Repanšek, Director of the Center of Excellence in Finance.
Policy making is very complex in today's changing world. It requires unprecedented leadership that is based on credible data and thorough analysis. It is very demanding for the policymakers. But not only that, they're also responsible for allocating budgets to these policies and to these reforms in order to implement them. On one hand, they have to work rigorously and they have to pay attention to detail. On the other end, they have to be imaginative and also daring. They have to also work quickly. But on the other side, they have to take time in order to pay attention to all the complexities. This work is not easy, but it brings results that can be replicated and that also bring innovation. At the CEF, we are honored to work with these leaders. When we design learning program, we ask ourselves many questions. Like, for instance, what do these leaders aspire to? And how do they connect to their peers and to the broader society? These are the questions we would like to answer together with you today. President J.F. Kennedy was to deliver the following message in Dallas in 1963. Leadership and learning are indispensable of each other. At the CEF, we very much agree with that.
This event is part of a 3-year European Commission project, Fiscal Implications of Structural Reforms. It is implemented by the Center of Excellence in Finance in the Western Balkans and Turkey. It is my pleasure to greet the audience in this region and beyond, and to all our guests who will be joining us today. We'll talk to the leaders of the... You're all invited to interact through us in the YouTube and Facebook channels. We all agree that the current crisis requires a solid recovery plan, and only a well-coordinated response can bring good and sustainable results. To get a better insight how the European Commission plans this, we are invited Ms. Barbara Banchi to join us.
Dear participants, let me thank first of all TEF for an invitation to address you at the Policy Dialogue in Bled, which is a beautiful place, but unfortunately we cannot meet here now today physically. Indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic continues confronting EU member states and enlargement countries with similar unprecedented challenges. I strongly believe that our common and well-coordinated European response and our solidarity are the key to address this crisis and to mitigate its negative socio-economic impact. In direct response to the crisis, the EU has already provided a substantial assistance to our partner countries through the Team Europe initiative, for instance, or through macro-financial assistance. now on a more strategic level and to boost sustainable recovery and economic development in the Western Balkans, the Commission has prepared an ambitious economic and investment plan. This financial package is demonstrating our firm commitment to the enlargement region and our solidarity with the people living there. Due to the current crisis and overall uncertainty, EU member states and partner countries are facing similar challenges when it comes to the effective economic planning and prioritization of the public expenditure. In spite of the limited fiscal space, it is crucial, however, to continue implementing reforms that will help overcome the structural weaknesses and foster the economic recovery. Here, we need to find a balance between the short-term measures to address the immediate impact of the crisis on one hand, and structural reforms that will foster the recovery in a more long-term perspective on the other. We also need to pursue prudent fiscal policy, carefully analyzing potential fiscal risks, but at the same time providing adequate support to the affected businesses and citizens. So how does the EU see the response to the crisis? We see the COVID-19 pandemic also as an opportunity and an incentive to rethink and reform our economic growth model. In the EU, we aim at the post-pandemic recovery to be sustainable, inclusive and just, a recovery that leaves no one behind. Thus, our recovery plan, called the Next Generation EU, aims at building up the economic resilience through the structural reforms that it will support, in particular, digital transformation and green transition. Similar approaches are also followed by other global leaders. This is why, for our enlargement partners, it is important to strengthen the economic governance by reinforcing the economic reform program's process. The next ERPs should propose the reform measures that focus on inclusive and sustainable economic growth, in line with priorities of green transition and digitalization. The ERP see the COVID-19 pandemic also as an opportunity and an incentive to rethink and reform our economic growth model. In the EU, we aim at the post-pandemic recovery to be sustainable, inclusive and just, a recovery that leaves no one behind. Thus, our recovery plan, called the Next Generation EU, aims at building up the economic resilience through the structural reforms that it will support, in particular, digital transformation and green transition. Similar approaches are also followed by other global leaders. This is why, for our enlargement partners, it is important to strengthen the economic governance by reinforcing the economic reform program's process. The next ERPs should propose the reform measures that focus on inclusive and sustainable economic growth, in line with priorities of green transition and digitalization. The ERP should become your effective instrument for strengthening the resilience of your countries towards social, economic and political crises. Let me reassure you, dear participants, that the EU will continue supporting your efforts on the recovery path and helping to further align our economic policies. It is our common responsibility to continue the reforms, enabling our economies to come out from this crisis even stronger.
We have all found ourselves in an unprecedented and tough situation. And not just this, it's already difficult to react in the unknown, but to plan the future, it's even more challenging. I'm now being joined by my co-host, Dion Tanzer, International Advisor for Statistics with experience in the IMF, Statistics Netherlands, and consulting. He's also working as a CF affiliated expert. If we were to meet in Bled, I wouldn't be surprised if he would be cycling all the way from Ljubljana. But today, he is joining me from The Hague.
Everybody from across the Balkan and beyond.
We have a couple of guests today. The first guest, with his vast and rich experience in the international organizations, entrepreneurship and academic work from Russia, Europe to the United States, and with a focus on strategic leadership, will be thinking about leading. Leading in the unknown, leading in the fog. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Pierre. Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, we are in the fog. The question is, are we in a crisis? That was raised before. Of course, we're in a crisis. And what's new? If you look at the evolution of humankind, men and women on this planet, that's what we have experienced in the past. A bit of stability, and then for some internal or external reasons, right, somebody's going to challenge, or something is going to challenge the system, and we have a crisis. Then if the proper leadership is around, then we can transform the crisis into an opportunity. We can, in other words, reinvent ourselves. And that has been a way to evolve and to move forward. Now, if the proper leadership is not around, then what we're facing is not reinvention, but it's regression. This is an oversimplification, but if you look at Europe in the Middle Age, it's 5 centuries of regression because the proper leadership, in a way, was not around. Now, I have some bad news for you. And the bad news, well, for us, for everybody, the bad news is that if the proper leadership is not around this time, well, what we're facing is not regression, but it's annihilation. I'm sorry, but humankind will disappear. We are really in a bad one this time, and also a fantastic opportunity to move forward and to transform ourselves. A couple of months ago, I was working with the CEO of a big multinational, and we're all together with the senior executive of the company, and he got one question, the CEO, got one question, Mr. CEO, when are we going to see the light at the end of the tunnel? And the CEO said, well, before seeing the light, maybe we should focus on the tunnel and understand a bit better what the tunnel is all about. And that's exactly where we are right now. That's the kind of situation we're in. And we are experiencing, for sure, some kind of ambiguity, some kind of confusion, some kind of denial. Many people are saying, it's not serious, it's not that bad. We'll survive this and so on. Well, there are many changes around. Let's face it, new changes, unexpected changes, misunderstood changes, and it's happening very fast. And that's why I think we are in the fog. Next slide, please. So what I would like to do is basically to look at the kind of uncertainty that we're exploring. Then I'll move next to an experiment, a scientific experiment, which could give us some clues about where we are and what we should pay attention to, and maybe the kind of mindset that we should develop to indeed move forward. Next is, well, I have to share with you, I think I should share with you a piece of research, a good, powerful, simple, and yet very effective piece of research on uncertainty, ambiguity, or on the fog. And finally, I will come up with some conclusion at the end of this presentation, and some challenging conclusion, as you will see in a few minutes. So here we go with the first element, and this is a scientific experiment. As I said before, it's called the bee-fly experiment. Just look at the picture in front of you, and you have in the bottle on the left, a bottle, a bee, and you can see through the bottle, and then on the right side you have bottle B and you have a fly, and both bottles are open, and at the bottom of each bottle you have a light, and the light is on. This is a serious experiment, huh? The light is on. So they're both, the bee and the fly, are trying to get out. And my question to you, everybody around, everybody who's watching, just think about it. They're both trying to get out of the bottle. The question is, which one out of the bee or the fly is going to get out first? Well, if your answer is the bee, you got it wrong. I'm sorry. The answer is absolutely foolproof. The bee, there's a good chance that the bee is going to die in the bottle, and the fly will be able to get out. Now let's see what we can learn from this little experiment from a leadership perspective. What do we learn from this? What is the problem with the bee? The problem with the bee is the following. The bee has learned that in a situation like that, it has to go to the light to survive. The bee is wrong, because what worked in the past is not working in this new situation that it is in right now. So the bee will die because the bee has not, listen please, has not learned to unlearn. What worked in the past, what can explain maybe the success that we had in the past, is not necessarily good anymore. Therefore, leaders must question their assumptions. They must question their usual ways of doing things and getting things done, because it's a new world in the making right now. Next, the fly. The fly is not so sophisticated. The fly, there's a good chance the fly is going to go left and right and finally will get out of the bottle. And that's the learning too, that in the fog, what we have to do sometimes is not to try to be too sophisticated, is not to try to really understand everything. No, it's just to get out. I remember a short story, if you don't mind. Picasso, the painter, is on the beach in the southern part of France. And a poet, a French poet, very well-known French poet, Pierre, is sitting next to him on the beach. Suddenly, Picasso, the painter, pointed at the sea and then at the waves, and he asked Pierre, the French poet, "Do you understand it?" And Pierre looked at the sea and the waves and said, "No, I don't understand." And then Picasso said, "Same here, I don't understand." And that's the question that we are raising right now. Do we understand the world? 3 learnings for leaders today. Please, there are times the B way is not right. To go on analyzing forever is not maybe the right way to survive in the fog. The flyway could be good. Trials and errors, cautious, yes, but trials and errors, and maybe also a bit of intuition. And the third learning basically is the following. It's not either or. There are times we should be the bee, there are times we should be the fly. It's up to us, leaders, to adjust our behavior to the requirements of the situation you're in. We have time, there are times we have to be analytical, there are times we should go and move on. Next, please. That's the first thing I wanted to share with you. Now, here is a little piece of research on uncertainty, on ambiguity. Actually, it's a little piece of research on the fog. On the fog. What do we know? What is uncertainty? Well, ambiguity is basically about, well, it's about being lost. It's being in the fog. It's about not understanding what it's all about. It's not really facing a situation in which you have contradiction and paradoxes. Next, please. So here we are as leaders facing ambiguity, uncertainty, being lost, experiencing confusion, and first learning from the research, ambiguity, uncertainty, as we're experiencing it right now, is a source of tension. Yes, there is tension, obviously, in the world today. There is tension in most organizations, in most teams, even in couples and families. Obviously, tension. Is it bad? Well, not necessarily. What we learned from the research that a bit of tension is not bad. Of course, if the tension is too big and if it's destructive, then the role of the leader is to take the tension away. And to take the tension away is by reducing the ambiguity, the uncertainty. Let me say it again. By clarifying the situation, by clarifying the objectives, by clarifying the strategies and so on and so forth, the leader takes the ambiguity away, and therefore he or she does reduce the tension. The research is also clear about something else, that sometimes a system, a society, an organization, a team is not experiencing enough tension. It's too flat. There is no energy around in the team and the organization, the society. then the role of the leader is not to reduce the ambiguity, is not to take the ambiguity around, is on the contrary to inject some kind of tension in the system that is too flat, so that the system can do something really good and effective. Next, the research is also showing that not only there is tension connected with ambiguity, but there is also something else called frustration. Yes, no question about it. No question about it. Ambiguity, uncertainty, the fog that we're in today is also a source of tension and frustration. Now, hold it. It's not that simple, and it's not that, that clear. Actually, some people, yes, hate the ambiguity. They cannot stand it. If you are the B type, the B in the bottom, if you're the B type, you don't like the ambiguity. Your first move in a given situation is to clarify it. But if you are more the fly type, then you use the flyway. The flyway is to enjoy the uncertainty, to enjoy the ambiguity, even to enjoy the fog, because then it gives you an opportunity maybe to do something new. Next is, now we reach, I think, a very interesting part. The research is also clear about not just the tension and frustration, but also about the kind of behavior that people do use when they are in the fog. And I think leaders, it's important for leaders to know what kind of reactions human beings, men and women, working in teams and organizations still today, right, what kind of reaction they have. The first reaction is basically the following. Next, please. The first reaction that you can record is withdrawing. Yes, some people will withdraw when they face ambiguity and uncertainty. Actually, it's a kind of, as the Anglo-Saxon call it, a kind of wait and see position. This is very interesting. Is withdrawing bad? Not at all. Actually, in the situation we're in today, sometimes it's not that bad to get out of this situation, is to step back a little bit and then to ask ourselves, what's going on here? And I guess that's what we have been experiencing with COVID-19 and the virus. The problem is that we cannot stay in the wait and see position for too long, including in business, by the way. So we can withdraw for a while, not for too long, please, and then come back with hopefully a better understanding of what's happening and what's going on in a given situation. That's the first behavior that we know we can point out from the research and from observation. Next is another behavior is, yes, take initiatives. This is more the flyway. The flyway is, all right, we are in the fog, let me try something. The door is open, let me go ahead and try something, which can be, in a way, a source of discoveries, a source of invention, and that can be extremely good for individual lives, but also for a team, for an organization, for a society. Just go for it. Now, be careful, because taking initiatives can go too far, and then you take a big risk. By rushing the vaccine for COVID-19, we have no choice. We had to come back. Wait and see, it's okay, but we have to come back. Now we're back. Wait, are we taking a risk? Well, maybe some, and maybe some very well controlled risk, hopefully. Thirdly, next please. The next one is, yes, the B way. What is the B way? The B way is to activate the IQ skills, or the IQ, to get a better understanding, not just of what's going on and what's happening, but a better understanding of what we can do, what we should do, how to turn this into an opportunity. So in other words, what's quite good, if you combine those three behaviors, that's okay. There is also a drawback, by the way, with the B way analyzing. It's called analysis paralysis, and we have to be careful with that. So research is clear, and leaders who are leading in the fog, as many leaders are today, should keep in mind that people around, including themselves, can indeed experience those three kinds of behaviors. The next point that I would like to make is that we also know that the ambiguity throughout history and the evolution of our societies on this planet Earth has been a source of creativity. Keep in mind, please, that what is creativity? Well, creativity is basically three things. Creativity is imagination. You come up with some new ideas. Invention, you transform the idea into something practical. And finally, innovation, you're able to sell your idea to a system, be an organization or a society. And that's what we can experience if we are smart enough to turn the ambiguity into something good for us. You can see also on your screen, hopefully, that there's a word synectics, which is quite interesting because the research has shown that geniuses, by and large, when they got an answer to the problem that we're working on, it's not just when they were in the lab working the problem that they got the kind of epiphany. No, it's when they were doing something else. Poincaré getting on the bus and saying, yes, that's it, I got the solution to my problem. So that's what we have to keep in mind, that synectics is not bad, because synectics is the leader creating ambiguity on purpose to basically trigger some fresh, new ways to look at a given situation. I have many examples about that and how to use it, but it's not quite the time and the place to do it. Let me reach now a tentative conclusion, if you don't mind. And here we are. Actually, the major challenge and the major opportunity that we are all facing right now could be described as the creation of the partnership between the organic intelligence, yours and mine, the flyway, and machine intelligence or artificial intelligence. So we're back to the fly and the bee, actually. So here we are. It's the issue, the challenge is not to control artificial intelligence. We are beyond that. We cannot control it anymore. We have created something that is beyond, which goes and can do beyond our own capacities right now. If you have a chance to read an editorial today in the New York Times on artificial intelligence, it's fantastic. This is it. It's an extremely good one-page article showing how the world is changing in the fog, how the machine intelligence is stepping in and helping us. It's not one against the other. It's basically being partners together to find out the solutions to many problems that we are facing and that we will face tomorrow. As a conclusion, in the UK, a couple of weeks ago, an article was published in The Guardian. And that article had the following title: Why Human Beings Should Not Be Afraid of Artificial Intelligence. You know what? That article was written by an algorithm that designed the article, wrote the article with no human being involved in it. Let me remind you what the title was. The title was, Why You, Human Beings, Men and Women, Should Not Be Afraid of Artificial Intelligence. That's the major challenge. What kind of partnership, and I'm at the end now, what kind of partnership are we going to create between the organic intelligence and the machine intelligence so that we can indeed not just survive, but move forward with our existence on this planet Earth? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kaas, for your enlightening presentation. Dion, was it the bee or the fly for you?
Well, honestly, I had the bee, but maybe that's because my daughter is a fangirl of Maya the bee. Professor, during your presentation, you spoke about what rescued us, or the Middle Ages. That was a regression in our ages. And the question is, what actually rescued us, and what can we learn from the time of rescue us from the Middle Ages?
I think what we can learn is the following, in a very simple way, that the past is fascinating, and we should pay attention to the past, all right, and maybe learn something from the past. Hold it. I'm not sure about that, and that's my main point. I don't think that in the situation we're in today, the past cannot teach us anything. Anything. Actually, it could be maybe a big mistake to go back to the past and try to get something and use it in a totally different environment like the one they're in today. I know
Is
it's a
there
bit
then nothing that we again, please?
Sorry?
Is there then nothing that we can learn? Is that we can inspire ourselves from the time of the past? So we should just forget about it and leave it to where it was.
Good point. Actually, we have to make a distinction, very good reaction, because we have to make a distinction between, for example, philosophical ideas that we can get from the past, ethical ideas or things that we can get from the past that are still applicable for us human beings today. But when we talk about organizing our lives, when we talk about practical things, for example, including health, of course, this is a good example. Can we really use what we did in the past in the kind of situation we're in today? Don't forget, most surgeries right now are done by robots. Huh? Thank God,
Exactly.
not by human beings anymore.
Well, I mean, I think you talked about philosophy, and you also touched about ambiguity, how that can lead to invention. And I believe that Plato said, necessity is the mother of all invention, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
you know, you also talked about the way that we can learn through trials and errors. And I believe we're going through a time where
Yes.
the leaders of our countries are going through trials and errors of lockdown, no lockdown, etc., etc. How is that tension that you can, for instance, feel in society today with these lockdowns and not lockdowns? How do we learn from that? How do we move forward with those kind of tensions now?
You're putting your finger on something critical there. Yes, and that's what I don't see in many teams or organizations, or even couples or families, by the way, because leadership is there too, by the way, huh? Men and women being leaders. What I think we can learn is the following. We must learn to apply in a much more effective way what we call objective self-examination. I think leaders must learn to really stop from time to time. I know we have to be careful, we have to move forward, but it's the fog. We have also to make sure that we take calculated risk. Objective self-examination. 3 ways to do it there. Number one, I'm sure you do it too. And at the end of the day, you're driving your car and you're reflecting on what happened during the day. And you're reflecting on who said what. How come I didn't stand up for my ideas in the meeting and so on and so forth. That's objective self-examination. The second one, but there are times when it's not good enough. We have to learn to listen to each other and to listen to the machines and the algorithm, because that's what doctors, medical doctors have to do now. Get information from the algorithm, from artificial intelligence. The third one is there are sometimes objective self-examination is not just you, it's not you and somebody playing the sounding board is also, going to some professional. And the professional today are the IT people, aren't they?
Exactly. So as you just saw pop on the screen, as a question for our dear audience, very burning questions
Yep.
for Professor Kass. Please send them through Facebook or YouTube chat. I see there's already a question that's come through from Andrei Oprison from the National Bank of Romania. From a politically complex and constrained environment nowadays, how doable are the proposals he is advancing, that you are advancing?
Can I react?
Sure, please do.
But that's what leadership is all about, isn't it? Leadership is basically to face a very difficult situation, is to face the fog, to realize it is the fog, and then to come up alone or in cooperation with other people and the machine intelligence, come up with the new ideas that, and involve, by the way, the new generations. Let's not wait until they are adults to involve them. I remember I taught a course in Brussels, University of Brussels, on leadership for young men and women who are 20 years old. Yes, that's the time. That's when we have to share our, quote, wisdom, unquote, with them. I put quote and unquote.
I completely agree with you.
Yes.
You were also just talking about self-reflection, right? And how leaders should self-reflect.
Yes.
You were talking with example, going home with the car, and you think about, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that today.
Yes.
Do you think leaders should also self-reflect in public?
Hey, that's very interesting, because that leads to the question, the basic question about democracy. Because that's a basic way, a basic principle in democratic system. You go and ask people what they think, all right? It's quite interesting that in Belgium, for example, the central bank is asking the people what they think the central bank of Belgium should do. Frankly, I don't believe that's wise. Why? Because there are things for which everybody should be involved. But there are also things that it's too complex. People cannot really say something that makes sense because there are too many factors involved and so on. So I think that the role of the leader is to be careful. Yes, for some issues, go public. You should. That's what a democratic system is all about. For some issues, you go ahead, then you explain to the people why you made that decision as a leader. And thirdly, I think there are times when you have to do it and go and do it. And if you start to explain to people, you know what's going to happen. People are going to start to shoot at each other, and that's not necessarily what you want. I interviewed a CEO in Russia a couple of years ago of a big multinational, and I asked him, do you tell the truth to your people? In other words, do you go public in your organization? Do you tell them the truth? And he looked at me and said, number one, I have to know what the truth is, which is not that simple. Number two, if the truth is going to do harm to people, no, I have to be very careful when I say it, to whom I say it, and how I communicate it. I think that's leadership.
Yeah, but I guess, sometimes one thing about leaders self-reflecting in public is also a question of trust, right? It's not only a question of what kind of problems you can bring into life, whether people should be faced with the truth or not. Isn't there an important relationship with trust?
Love it, Dave. Love it. And that's a good way, maybe, to conclude this program. Trust. Yes, that's the third factor, actually. All right, you have the bee and the fly, and then you have ambiguity. And now you are injecting a third dimension, which is so critical, trust. There is so much mistrust around today. Therefore, in organizations, including in families with the COVID-19, people are forced to live together 24 hours, a day, and so on and so forth. Trust, keep in mind as a leader, keep in mind that trust is based on two things. One is credibility. And credibility is about, do people believe you when you, as a leader, you say something? And the other factor is reliability. Do you deliver on your promises? Every leader, public and private sector, should, from time to time, ask himself or herself the question, am I credible? Am I reliable? Do people believe me when I say something? And do I deliver on my promises? If the answer is yes and yes, you have trust around.
Well, that's excellent. I think with that note, I will take that with me. And I think we share something in Brussels and The Hague. And that's what we got, a lot of fog. And I think that should at least inspire us to new good ideas. So thanks a lot, Professor Kass, and greetings there in Brussels. Going back to Anna, I think we also talked about collaboration and how it can help us navigate through the fog.
Collaboration often gives better results as it brings together different ideas, approaches, and experience. Collaboration between sectors, public and private, has important benefits for both sides. This broadcasting venture was made possible by joining the energy and knowledge of two organizations whose main goal is to promote learning: the Center of Excellence in Finance and the Bled School of Management. The founder and president of the Bled School of Management has been running it for the past 30 years and goes by the motto, "Only the best is good enough." You might have recognized the quote, ladies and gentlemen, Danica Purk.
IDC Bled School of Management is very happy and proud to collaborate with Center of Excellence in Finance. We see namely that we need each other, that we can support each other and learn from each other. But we also have great experience from the past when we were putting people from private sector and people from public sector together, and they were learning from each other, supporting each other, creating a network which was important for the rest of their life. And that's why we see how it is important to do just what this COVID crisis now brought up again. Much more important than before is, for instance, now collaboration instead of competition, much more communication, innovativeness, and of course the creativity. So I hope that we shall continue with this venture and that we shall make this world a better place.
Dion, now that we dived into cross-sectoral cooperation, I'm intrigued about your next guest, so I looked up their backgrounds. Anita Angelovska-Bežovska, joining us from North Macedonia. Where to start? From her early career as a state secretary at the Ministry of Finance, during which I'm proud to remember our close cooperation at several learning events introducing public financial management to junior employees at the ministries, to the IMF, first European and then fiscal department, followed by years as the chief economist and now the governor of the National Bank of North Macedonia. Gazmend Hadjia, joining us from Albania, an alumni member of Bled School of Management, a man of very rich background. When asked how we should present him for this broadcast, he said serial entrepreneur. And I thought, why serial? And it became very clear when reading his CV. He has extensive experience in identifying opportunities and establishing companies in diverse industry segments and markets. Currently, he's active in logistics, tourism, and education, and also pursues an academic career at the Faculty of Entrepreneurship. Dion, I think this is a great company to talk about the way the public and the private sectors compare and align in leading through the uncertainty.
Very much so. Thanks, Anna. Governor, Mr. Hadjia, for a leader, these are interesting and challenging times. We have seen 190 plus countries respond in about 190 plus ways to the same global crisis, all determining local resolutions to social and economic questions with country-specific political circumstances. I believe your experience are accounts of navigating through uncertainty. So to both of you, I want to ask, how do you manage with limited information and data to make decisions or design policy, especially now in COVID times where clear information becomes scarce? Governor?
Thank you, Dan. First of all, let me thank organizers for invitation to be part of this excellent event. It's really a pleasure for me being part and together with you. So how are we managing this limited information? How are we doing our decision making? As Professor nicely mentioned on a couple of occasions, I would like to continue with the concept of fogginess, which I think is very important in this current environment. In my view, decision-making without proper data and information infrastructure is like driving a car during the foggy weather. This in particular when the macroeconomic models are not suited to the specifics of the shock. As we are all aware, we are facing a shock that is not due to the imbalances in the real economy nor vulnerabilities in the financial sector, but with a shock which stems from the health purposes, but the shock that has quickly transmitted into the real economy, resulting with a biggest crisis since the Great Depression. So these specific features of this new environment, on the one hand, inherently increase the fogginess for the policymakers, but on the other hand, they also require swift and strong policy measures on the side of the policymakers. So what does it mean? It means that we are faced with extreme challenges in doing our job. Still, based on my personal experience, I would like to point out to a couple of aspects which I think help in preventing excessive fogginess for us as a policymakers. First of all, given the monetary strategy of stable exchange rate that we are pursuing, which in principle asks for stronger cooperation and coordination between the fiscal and monetary policy, we have stepped in our efforts to further enhance the cooperation with a view of having an optimal policy mix, which means policy mix that is supportive to the real economy, but also policy mix that is not undermining the credibility and stability of the pact. Then second item, which is I think is very important, is that in the last decade, we have invested a lot of efforts in closing the data gaps that emerged during the global financial crisis by producing new data sets and improving the quality, timeliness, and frequency of the current data sets. So practically the crisis for us has played catalytic role in providing more detailed, granular, and rich data sets, especially in the financial sector, which is key in the current context for identifying warning signs at an early stage, adopting and deploying appropriate measures, very importantly, assessing the effectiveness of these measures, and if needed, recalibrating the measures with a view of increasing the effectiveness. Then we have also explored the opportunities for using other available data sets such as micro data, administrative sources, as well as private digital platforms of data, which provide partial though useful high-frequency information on the state of the economy and the behavior of the economic agents, which for us as monetary policymaker is very important. In this context, I'm very grateful to my colleagues, statisticians. They have made a lot of effort in trying to strike a right balance between our needs as a policymakers to have more information and the problems and difficulties that the reporting agents are faced for providing timely and high quality data. So overall, I would say, or in a nutshell, we somehow managed to drive a car during the foggy weather, though I'm sure that this crisis, like all other previous crises, will bring at the surface many new information and data gaps on which we will have to work by devising a new statistical frameworks with a view of closing these gaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. As a statistician, your gratitude for data is obviously a warm thing to hear. Mr. Hadja, how have you dealt with limited information to make decisions?
Well, thank you for the invitation. And what I'd like to say is that, being a serial entrepreneur, it's that it is a way of like managing and navigating in the unknown. So although this was a totally different story, it still the same kind of principles that we used and utilized when waiting for any opportunity where we succeeded or we failed. So the first thing which we relied to was the past, and from the past we got the culture of the team, where we had as the cornerstone, we have trust and respect. So what we did is we were in a place. It was very, very important. And the second thing, safety of family and of course the team, but very important, there was liquidity. Because if there was no liquidity, then I'll not be able to pay the staff, I'll not be able to move around. So the third thing we did is we made sure that the mental health of the team was at its most possible, because I believe without a very good state of mental health, we cannot move forward. And in order to really keep motivating in those challenging times, which was a big challenge in itself, we created a program where we educate the team, because without this will be over and we'll be on the other side of the ocean. It's only the strongest companies will be surviving, and the team there will be ready to embark on the new initiatives, whereas the other companies and the other competitors will be out of the game, or they'll be emerging in a very weak state. And in itself, it is a big advantage. And what's very important as well is to make sure that in this hard time, discipline, and how we try to create a kind of muscle, with mental muscle and physical muscle with the team, trying to do something which was not normal, trying to do sports without, trying to talk to each other, to create things, be creative, and which could move us around. And as I said at the very beginning, which would motivate us for the next steps, which was very important. I'm very happy to report that in those crisis period, and I've had businesses like it's a basic zero, but we have reinvented and some great opportunities. So as Warren Buffett, to be wasted. And I'm very happy to be on this talk to share this experiences today.
Great. Thanks for those interesting thoughts. One of the things I hear through what you were saying is this investment in your staff and getting your staff to also start thinking in an inventive way moving forward. I also want to remind our audience, if you've got any questions for our two panelists, please send them through our Facebook or YouTube accounts, and we will certainly pass them through. On our next question, again to the governor, in these trying times, how do you motivate staff to keep moving towards finding the way through the fog?
Okay, so the new corona environment creates many challenges across all organizations, including for us, central bankers, especially leaders in the central bank. As we have already mentioned, we are shouldering a huge responsibility of providing unprecedented policy response to unprecedented shock with a view of avoiding a collapse of the private sector. This context is more than ever underlines a need or importance of having a motivated staff that is prepared and willing to embrace with a new environment by practically thinking creatively and acting innovatively. In the same time, not to forget that this is a shock that has practically changed the way how we do our work. That is, face-to-face environment have evolved into environment, a virtual environment, mostly for the most time, posing a lot of communication and motivation challenges. So given this new normal, I think that the leaders, to be able to motivate their staff and thus build resilience of the organizations, first they need to build their own resilience by finding their inner citadels, as only from that places they can see not only the threats, but also the opportunities, and thus come up with some creative ideas, including the ideas how better to do the organization in the specific circumstances and how to come up with ideas to keep their staff motivated. So upon building our own resilience, given the current realities, we need to show our employees, our workforce, that they are not just employees, that we don't care for them only as employees, but also as human beings by providing adequate safeguards against the virus, such as new ways of doing their job, remote work, rotational models of work, as well as helping them with the personal health problems, which might in some occasions even blur the privacy lines. Furthermore, we have continued investing in knowledge through access to online seminars, workshops, and so on, demonstrating them that they are the most valuable asset that we as an organization have, as we are well aware that they are key and they will shape not just the success in dealing with the current crisis, but also shape the success in implementing the medium-term challenges in our organization that stem from the new changing environment. And last but not least, I think what is very important is to change the way how we communicate with our employees, to show more compassion and empathy, which are not anymore seen as nice to have qualities, but seems that they are integral part of our communication with our employees. In fact, there are a lot of research papers that clearly point to the strong interlinkages which are present between the employees' emotional, physical, and mental resilience and organizational resilience, that is capability of organization to adapt, innovate, and succeed. So overall, I think what we are trying is that we are trying to clearly show the principle of putting people first, as we think it is key, not just from getting through these pandemics, these difficult times for all of us, but even more so from emerging from this crisis stronger and more resilient.
Thank you kindly, Governor. I think the word resilience has come through quite strongly there. And I think that's, you invest a lot in your staff to give them time, to give them space for creativity. Mr. Hajia, how's it been going in your organization, motivating staff?
Okay, I'll be very brief. I believe that it's very important to walk the talk and to really show that it's me that is not changed. So the contents of my package has changed. What has changed, though, is the priority ingredients of the leadership package which I have. And if at the very beginning, at different timings, I'll be very key on different KPIs, the KPI metrics change. And the main KPIs in those times was the well-being of the staff, was the fact that they have safety, that they were safe. And we put in the priority level two elements which were very critical. And this was social intelligence. By really understanding, being emotionally on the same world with the staff, that this is something we'll pass together, and that this is something which will pass, and we'll celebrate that we all will be safe when this is gone. And I saw that it really put high, let's say, points on the scorecard of the company, because people, our contribution to the community, to the well-being of the team, and I think everything else followed after that. And of course, professionally, we have done, I would say we have done quite a lot of things, but they came, I would say, on the second rank. The first rank was, we want those people who did €0 for 9 months to feel respected and to feel that something which all will go through together, because all the achievements we had, it was joined up. So I believe this has worked wonders, and I'm very happy that we followed that strategy.
Well, that's excellent, because I think I've drawn new inspiration, or you've drawn new inspiration for CEOs. The new KPI is the well-being of staff. I'm sure the two of you have got some challenging questions from your different perspectives, from the private to the public sector. Please, Governor, do you have a question for Mr. Hajia on how he faces with these challenges and uncertainty?
Yes, I may ask one question, how Mr. Hajia, for example, sees the role of the public sector, policymakers, how they are performing in these difficult times, and if he were at the position of a policymaker, for example, central bank governor, how would he approach this very challenging environment that we all face with?
Well, thank you, Madam Governor, for the great question. I believe that these are times which challenge all of us, and a better cooperation between private sector and public sector is needed, because we all are part of this ecosystem. One suggestion I would have for the Central Bank of Albania, and if you allow me, normal is taking the board more people from the entrepreneurial lifestyle and entrepreneurial world in order to drive more entrepreneurial, let's say, flavor into the central government domain. I know it is like an oxymoron, having more entrepreneurial spirit into the central bank, but I believe to listen more to what the private sector really wants and into the policies that you will advise, and on the second, that would be, I think, crucial.
Thank you.
Mr. Hajia, do you have another reverse challenging question for Madam Governor?
I think it's a challenging, but it's a very friendly question, because I really can feel that Madam Governor could be a great role in the private sector. So my question is, if COVID-19 ends tomorrow, and then you will be CEO of the leading company in North Macedonia, what will be the first thing you'll do tomorrow?
Okay, thank you for the question. I must say it's a difficult question for me as somebody who has spent years being on the other side. But of course, I very much agree with the point that you mentioned, that we need a close cooperation, because between the private and public sector, we have to listen to each other, because that's only way to design optimal policy mix. There are many unknowns now in this crisis, and but one thing that I am sure is that current circumstances pose ultimate leadership tests for managers in the private sector and in the public sector. So first thing, I think what we need to focus to go out from this crisis, practically I would say there are short-term challenges, medium-term challenges, and long-term challenges in the path to the recovery and coming to more calmer times. First thing, what I think it's needed to be done on both fronts, private and public sector, is reacting quickly and decisively to keep company alive. That is survival, which is necessity, which means practically extinguishing the fires that we are dealing with now. However, what is very important for the future, what we need is adapting the business models to the new behaviors. Now we are faced with the changing patterns of behaviors of the economic agents, and many studies de facto point that this is not a temporary changes, but these are changes here to stay. So it's very important to adopt the business to this new environment. Practically, this will mean leveraging on the opportunities that the crisis brings. And third, very importantly, I think prospectively looking, even after the crisis, which is very important as leaders to bring into our thinking more sustainability, more longer term vision, such as including in the business that we do in private and public, for example, greening of the financial sector, greening of the economy, inclusiveness, and so on. And of course, all this requires to have a good, motivated staff ready to embrace with all the challenges in front of us and ready to adapt. Adaptability, I think it's a key word. It has to be part of our regular life.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both. I think you've both enriched me with more experience, insights through navigating through uncertain circumstances. I think you've drawn a lot from your experience, good at looking to the future, and I think one thing that I've drawn throughout this presentation is we need to listen to each other. I see there's another question that's coming through from our guests within the Balkans, from Zdravko Miovicic. He's the director of the Enterprise Development Agency. I think a quick answer from both of you. Leaders or networks? What is the better if you are in the fog? Mr. Adjian.
Yeah, I don't think you can separate, because I see networks as part of a very good leadership strategy. So if you lead, you really have to rely on networks. So I see both of things and both concepts as very inseparable. So you lead through networks, through networking, and through creating better network for the future.
Madam Governor?
I agree. These two concepts are not separable concepts, even for each organization. Having good leadership, in my view, includes having a good networking, having a good team, good connections, internal and external, to have a good coordination and cooperation, because only when you're open to hear new ideas, to discuss, to hear critical thinking employ in a way holistic approach in all these things, this is the way that can lead us forward.
Great, thanks both. Again, I felt that was very interesting sessions altogether. I hope you're going to have an enjoyable day there in Skopje and in Tirana. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing you again when I can finally be back in the Balkan. Anna.
Thank you.
Dion, next time is Slovenia, right?
I think you're on. I heard through the grapevine there's some kind of celebration coming forward.
That's true. In 2021, the Center of Excellence in Finance will celebrate its 20th anniversary of support to the region of Western Balkans in their reforms. The Bled Strategic Forum, a leading international conference of Central and Southeastern Europe, which also celebrates an important milestone this year, is offering platform to participants from various fields with diverse knowledge and encourages them to exchange views and seek innovative solutions to present and future challenges. Since the original setup of today's event should have been under the Bled Strategic Forum umbrella earlier this year, we have invited General Secretary Mr. Peter Grk to share a couple of thoughts and outcomes of this year's forum and their plans for the future.
This year, in September, we have celebrated 15th anniversary of the Bled Strategic Forum. In 15 years, Bled Strategic Forum became one of the most important and biggest strategic events in Central and Southeastern Europe. Together with our current and future partners as Center of Excellence in Finance, we are trying to give our share to finding solutions and answers to the most pressing and important issues of today and tomorrow. One of such issues is enlargement, and one of the regions which is in this context extremely important is of course the region of Western Balkans, where Center of Excellence in Finance is doing remarkable work in trying to give impetus to stability, economic progress and sustainable development of the region. We would like to continue exploring possibilities and ways of how to help this region reach our mutual goal, to become member of the European Union as soon as possible. And with this Bled Strategic Forum and the Center of Excellence in Finance would like to continue their collaboration also in the future.
With this, we come to a close of our live event of navigating to the new normal. We're pleased that we could hold this event as an alternative to the face-to-face event planned earlier this year during the Bled Strategic Forum. Our warm thanks go to all the partners who helped make this event happen. The Bled School of Management, the European Commission, Bled Strategic Forum, and our broadcast crew. Many thanks to Professor Kas, Governor Angeloska Bežoska, and Mr. Hadžija for sharing their insights and experience. A big thank you to the courageous and daring CEF team for diving into the unknown online broadcasting world. And lastly, special thanks to you, all our guests who tune in from across the Balkans and beyond. This event has been recorded and will be available on the CEF YouTube stream for you to review it and share with your colleagues. Thank you, and see you soon again.